Hi everyone. We're now in part 2 of sensation and perception, and we're going to be looking at the senses of hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Now let's carry on from last week, and we're going to look at where we looked at our visual system, our eyes, and how we perceive light waves for our brain to make sense of the world around us. Now we're going to consider our hearing, our taste, smell, and skin senses. And we'll begin with hearing. Sound, or auditory stimulation, travels through the air like waves, again not unlike visual. The changes in air pressure are vibrations that approach our ears in waves. The human ear is sensitive to sound waves with frequencies from 20 to 20,000 cycles per second. Now a couple of other terms here, pitch and loudness. Pitch and loudness are two psychological dimensions of sound. The pitch of a sound is determined by its frequency, or the number of cycles per second it's expressed in the units of hertz. The greater the number of cycles per second, the higher the pitch of sound. Now the loudness of sound roughly corresponds with the height or amplitude of sound waves. So if that's a wave, the height, the top part, is what's considered the amplitude, and it's expressed in decibels. 25 decibels is equivalent to the loudness of a whisper at 5 feet. 30 decibels equivalent to the loudness of what your librarian would like your college library. 85 to 90 decibels may cause hearing damage with prolonged exposure. Now, our ears are the source of where sound waves enter for us to make sense of them. And the ear has three parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is shaped sort of to funnel sound waves towards the eardrum. The eardrum is a thin membrane that vibrates in response to sound waves and thereby transmits them to the middle ear and the inner ear. The middle ear contains the eardrum, the three small bones, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, and the middle ear functions as an amplifier. That's its function. The stirrup is attached to another vibrating membrane, the oval window. The oval window transmits vibrations into the inner ear to a bony tube called a cochlea. Now the cochlea, it's like a snail-shaped structure that contains longitudinal membranes that are divided into three fluid-filled chambers. One of the membranes that lies within the cochlea is a basilar membrane. Now, attached to the basilar membrane is an organ of Corti. Sometimes it's referred to as the command post of hearing. Here there are 25,000 receptor cells, they're called hair cells. And these hair cells dance in response to the vibrations of the basal membrane. Their up and down movements generate neural impulses which are transmitted to the brain via the auditory nerve. Auditory input is then projected onto the hearing areas of the temporal lobes and the cerebral cortex. Now, locating sounds. A sound that is louder in the right ear is perceived as coming from the right. Both loudness and the sequence in which the sounds reach the ears provide directional cues. Perception of loudness and pitch. Loudness and pitch of sounds appear to be related to the number of receptor neurons on the organ of Corti that fire and how often they fire. Psychologists generally agree that sounds are perceived as louder when more of these sensory neurons fire. Now, there's two major theories that attempt to explain hearing: place theory and frequency theory. Place theory states that the location of the hair cells on the basal membrane correspond to different pitches of sound. frequency theory, it notes that for us to perceive lower pitches, we need the stimulation of neural impulses that match the frequency of the sound waves. So if we're thinking in terms of this is how we hear, so what happens regarding people who don't hear, people who are deaf? More than 3.1 million Canadians have a hearing impairment, and 310,000 cannot hear at all. There's two types of deafness. One is conductive, and the other is sensorineural deafness. Now, conductive deafness stems from damage to the structures of the middle ear. This is the hearing impairment, often found among older people. Hearing aids often help these people. Now, sensorineural deafness, this stems from damage to structures in the inner ear, most often the loss of hair cells. The ringing sensation that often follows exposure to loud noises probably means that hair cells have been damaged. Hair cells often do not regenerate. Individuals become sensitive to sounds and not others. The cochlear implant can assist individuals with this type of damage by bypassing the damaged cells, directly stimulating the auditory nerve. Okay, now that's a quick overview on hearing, and we'll move into the chemical senses, and we'll look at smell and touch. Smell contributes to the flavor of foods. If you do not have a sense of smell, an onion and an apple would taste the same to you. Humans can detect the odor of 1/millionth of a milligram of vanilla in a liter of air. We're pretty sensitive, some clearly more sensitive than others. An odor is a sample of molecules of the substance being sensed. Odors are detected by sites on the receptor neurons in the olfactory membrane high in each nostril. Chances are, if you've had a COVID test, they've been exploring your olfactory membrane with a stick. I know it's not quite that way. It sure felt like it. Their firing transmits information about odors to the brain via the olfactory nerve. Now, taste, it's sensed through the taste cells located on taste buds. Humans have approximately 10,000 taste buds, most of which are located on the edge and the back of our tongue. Other taste receptors are located on the roof, sides, and back of our mouth, and in the throat even. There are 4 primary taste qualities: sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Now, some will argue that there's a 5th, umami. Exactly. Which means meaty or savory. The flavor of foods depends on its odor, texture, and temperature, as well as on its taste. Now, sensitivities to different tastes apparently have strong genetic components. There are people that are known as super tasters, people who experience taste sensations more intensely due to a larger number of taste buds. And by the contrast, we have non-tasters, people who have little to no taste sensation of a particular type, for example, to bitterness. Now that, again, is a quick overview on taste. And we'll start with skin senses. Now, in skin senses, it's a little bit more complex. It involves touch, pressure, warm, cold, and pain. Touch and pressure, sensory receptors embedded in the skin, fire when the surface of the skin is touched. Active touching means continually moving your hand along a surface of an object so that you can continually receive sensory input from that object. It involves pressure, temperature, texture, and feedback from the muscles involved in the movement of your hands. Now, there are different parts of the body are more sensitive to touch and pressure than other parts. Sensory nerve endings are more densely packed in the fingertips and face than any other location. Temperature. The receptors for temperature are neurons located just beneath the skin. Sensations of temperature are relative based on the temperature of your body. Pain. Now, according to a survey commissioned by the Canadian Pain Society, this was done in 2007 and it's been repeated, 50% of Canadians experience pain at least once a week. 18% report that they lived in constant pain. 1 in 3 of those surveyed claimed they had lost a job due to pain. 47% had their job altered due to pain. 2 in 5 Canadians with moderate to severe chronic pain feel helpless. 30% of chronic pain sufferers feel little to no support or understanding from their friends and family. Pain means that there's something wrong in the body. Pain results when neurons called nociceptors in the skin are stimulated. Now, pain is adaptive. Pain is sharp where the nerve endings are densely packed. There are no nerve endings for pain in the brain. In fact, surgeries on the brain, although there is anesthesia for pain of cutting the skin, the brain, when they're doing surgery on the brain, the person is awake so that they can give feedback about where they are touching in the brain to ensure they're in the right place. Prostaglandins, this is also known as substance P, facilitates transmission of the pain message to the brain and heightens circulation to the injured area. This is what causes inflammation and redness. Inflammation serves the biological function of attracting infection-fighting blood cells to the affected area to protect it against invading germs. The pain message is relayed from the spinal cord to the thalamus and then projected to the cerebral cortex. Now, other aspects that could influence pain: visual and other sensory inputs tell us what is happening and influence the cognitive interpretation of the situation. If you're in an accident and you look around you and see the devastation that's occurring, it could elevate your sensitivity to the pain that you're experiencing. Emotions can influence the level of pain experienced. Feelings of helplessness can increase pain, whereas confidence can actually diminish pain. Now, one of the theories is known as, for explaining pain, is what's known as gate control theory. Melzack and Wall originated the gate control theory of pain. The nervous system can produce only a limited amount of stimulation at a time. In a sense, there's a competition for neurons. Flooding prevents any calls getting through at all. There is a term that's known as phantom limb pain. Now, this is where someone who has lost a limb feels pain in that missing limb. About 2 out of 3 combat veterans with amputated limbs report feeling pain in the missing or phantom limb. It seems to involve activation of nerves into the stump of the missing limb. There's also a reorganization of the motor and somatosensory cortex. Now, what's interesting about the phantom limb is that the solution to it is rather novel. It's using a mirror and a fake hand for them to see a hand at the end of their stump can make the pain go away. And with numerous trials at this, can actually diminish the pain without the use of the mirrors. Now, kinesthetics is the sense that informs you about the position and motion of parts of your body. Sensory information is fed back to the brain from sensory organs in the joint, tendons, and muscles. This is where, if you've been in gymnastics or you've been on a trampoline and you go up and do a somersault, that you can actually get out and land on your feet. That's that kind of kinesthetics. Some people are much more strong at that and have a good awareness of where they are in space, where others, once they start spinning or tumbling, lose perspective about where they are. Now, the vestibular sense, your vestibular sense tells you whether you are physically upright. Your sensory organs are located in semicircle canals and elsewhere in the ear monitor your body's motion and position in relation to gravity. They tell you if you are falling or if your body is changing speed. Both are important things to know about. Now, this little bit we'll touch on here is on extrasensory perception, ESP. Is there perception without sensation? Extrasensory perception. About 60% of Canadians believe that some people have psychic powers, or ESP. Precognition, psychokinesis, telepathy, or clairvoyance. So let's just do a quick definition. Precognition is the ability to perceive future events in advance. It just seems that many of the people who claim they can don't predict their own death. Interesting. Psychokinesis is the mentally manipulating or moving of objects. Telepathy is the direct transmission of thoughts and ideas from one person to another. And clairvoyance is the perception of objects that don't stimulate the sensory organs. Rhine studied ESP for several decades with the conclusion that some people might have some degree of ESP. Gansfeld's procedure, one person acts as the sender and the other as the receiver. Receivers correctly identified the visual stimulus 38% of the time. The percentage is unlikely to be due to chance. So they don't know exactly how much is or isn't. There it is. The file drawer problem. ESP researchers are less likely to report research results that show failure. People who have demonstrated ESP with one researcher have failed to do so with another researcher. No one person has emerged who can reliably show ESP from one occasion to another, from one researcher to another. Another reminder that belief and scientific evidence are not the same thing. Okay, that completes the second part, looking at the senses of hearing, taste, smell, and skin sense or touch. All right, there we are. We're done. Let's move on.